Survivors, seekers, and thrivers, welcome to Transcending Trauma, a spiritual odyssey. I'm Shari Lee Roberts, living proof that transformation is real. Get ready for powerful insights, inspiring stories, and a little laughter along the way.
Hey, thank you again for dropping in. I heard what you thought about my AI voice, and therefore I am using my own voice from here on out. Let me know what you think. Well, good afternoon. I have a tremendous treat for all of you. I have a gal, Victoria Womersley, who I like to call a sister from a different mister. Our stories are so similar that I can't wait for all of you to hear her and be inspired. So, Victoria follow bio is down in the description, but I want to say that not only is she a survivor, but thriver after years of narcissistic abuse. Now, she is also an CEO copywriter, and he has helped me with my website copy, LinkedIn copy, and we are going to work together on other things. Now, Victoria, welcome, and I don't know that I told you this, but I adore you, and you're kind of stuck with me from here on out. I just am a huge fan and would love for a friendship to keep evolving. Okay, enough about that. Welcome, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, Shari, and just thank you for this lovely introduction as well. And I hope that we do have a friendship. It would be lovely.
Okay, let me frame a little bit before you tell us a bit about you. We met on LinkedIn, and I was in desperate need of someone like you who could take my vision and what I do and make copy so that others like me and you can get the help they need in their healing journey. So we met, and you were asking me more detailed things about what I actually do and how it works. So it came to me from Spirit, your Spirit team, to do a psychic reading and an energy healing, and that way you would know everything you needed to know to write the copy. What I didn't know at the time was that you had endured years of trauma and abusive relationship. And then, upon learning that, found out you were yet another victim that didn't know that you were. Okay, so we'll go back now, and then we'll come back to that point when you learned what your story really was. Sound good?
Sounds good. Yeah, it does.
Okay, so do you mind sharing a bit about your history? What was your childhood like?
Well, I think like most kids, I at the time thought my childhood was pretty normal. As I've gotten older, I've found out that it's not quite so normal. My dad and my mum divorced when I was quite small. My mum walked out on my dad, and I think we were able to see her sort of every second weekend for the first year of their divorce, and then my dad moved us to the country and I lost touch with my mum. My dad remarried. So my mum and my dad divorced and sort of split when I was about 6, and my dad remarried when I think I was about 8 or 9. Throughout this time, I was going to what I was told was church, and then when I grew up and got to be sort of early adult, found out that it was a cult. It's so part of the what do they call themselves? The Worldwide Church of God. And at that time, that we were part of that. Apparently they've cleaned themselves up now. Yeah, so we were friends with people that we went to church with, not so friendly with people that I went to school with, or those sorts of things. So yeah, my dad remarried when I was about 8. They were married for about 4 years, and they also that relationship also ended. I was raised by my dad. He remarried again when I was 16, and I moved out of home when I was about 17. Got a job.
You mind talking more about the cult, about the Worldwide Church of God? What made it a cult, and what impacts did it have on you and your dad? And did you tell me you're an only child, or?
No, I've got 3 siblings.
Okay. And where are you in that hierarchy?
I'm the third of 4.
Okay. Yeah, do you mind giving us more context about the church?
So a few of the rules were we didn't keep Christmas or Easter or sort of the usual Christian celebrations. Instead, we had sort of, it was like a Christian Judaism sort of mix. So we had the Day of Atonement, we had the Night to be Much Remembered, sort of very sort of Old Testament focused. We didn't celebrate our own birthdays or the birthdays of our friends and family. And I was told sort of a lot of it was preached a lot that we needed to keep our minds closed to the possibility of, you know, demons getting in and taking control, or being lured away into the world of evil and men. So it was so relationships outside of that church were discouraged. I think that's one of the main sort of culty sort of themes, I guess, is that sort of creating that exclusivity, but also the isolation of members from other parts of society.
Wow. Okay. And you did say that their church is a combination of Jehovah's.
No, Jewish and Christian. So it's Christian Zionist sort of mix.
Wow. It sounds like Jehovah Witness. Okay. Thank you. So you left home at 17. Was that due to your dad? His wife, or just if you would share where you were emotionally and why you left.
So I was 17. I had started a hairdressing apprenticeship. I wasn't getting along with my dad and my new stepmom very well. And I knew that it was a difficult relationship for them as well. And I thought it was probably just better for all of us if I moved out. So I moved out into a share flat with a couple of other young adults same age as me, and carried on with my apprenticeship. I still went home and sort of caught up with my dad on weekends and things like that, but I think it was better for our relationship that I wasn't sharing his house anymore. And yeah, and I was taking my own freedom, like you do when you're in your late teens. You want to sort of spread your wings. So yeah, it just seemed to be a logical step.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So, when did you meet your husband, and how old were you? And if you would just talk about what your thoughts about him were, and initially, and yeah, just meeting him and those early years.
So when I met the partner that I've just left, the father of my two boys, I was already married. So I married quite young when I was about 22. And I married my then husband. And I met the father of my sons through him. I came home from work one day and he was sat on the couch speaking with my husband. So they were chatting and we kind of became friends. My husband at the time had been made redundant from his job and became very depressed, didn't work again. So I was working two jobs sort of to make ends meet. My ex-partner, my boy's dad, he was living with his girlfriend at the time. He was working a couple of different jobs. He had an interest in art as do I. And we sort of got along. We kind of hit it off sort of on a friend's way.
So your recent ex-husband, father of your two boys, was friends with your first husband, and that's how you two met.
That's right.
Okay.
And then, and then sort of things with my husband. So my boy's dad and I never married. So it was common law partnership, I suppose.
Okay.
But my husband we were still in Australia at that time, and he didn't complete all of the tasks that immigration asked him to do. One day immigration came round and deported him, took him from home and deported him back to the UK. And at that time, my ex-partner, my boy's dad, was in England because his father had died. So we weren't in touch at that time. But anyway, my ex-husband was sent back to the UK, and I was sort of looking into ways that he could be repatriated to me, or that maybe I would go to England, those sorts of things. But that relationship completely fell apart. It was already falling apart, but it fell apart, and it was around about that in the middle of that, I had a call from my now ex-partner saying that he'd returned to Australia, he'd broken up with his girlfriend, and he needed somewhere to stay. And I said, you can sleep on my couch. I always have room for friends. And so he did. We ended up moving into a different house together with another person, and we shared a house for about a year. Over the course of that year, I went through divorce from my husband, figured out what I was going to do, because all of my plans of sort of starting a family and living happily ever after had sort of not eventuated, and I decided I was going to go traveling. So my now ex said, well, I'm going back to England. And I said, well, England's on one of the countries I'm going to move to, travel to. I'll see you when I get there. And so we met up when I got to the UK. And as they say, the rest is history. So.
Okay. So, were you born in Australia, or I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm Australian, but I've lived in the UK now for just over 20 years, which is probably why I sound more British than Australian.
Yeah, definitely. Oh my God. Interesting, loving all of it so far, and thank you for being honest and authentic. I know how difficult it is. So now you are in the UK where you left off. You are divorced, and the man who became the father of your boys, you got into the UK and you contacted him and let him know you're there. What year was that?
It was 2004. So we'd stayed in touch while I was traveling. He flew out to Thailand and met me met me for a week or two down on the islands in Thailand. That was lovely. And then I flew on to Nepal and India and then to the UK. And so he picked me up from the airport when I arrived in Heathrow, and we rented a flat together and moved down to the south coast of England. So that was sort of the proper beginning of our relationship, I suppose.
Okay, so it sounds like your initial early years together were good.
Yeah, to begin with, it was a good start. Like it felt like
Yeah.
a good start.
So, at what point did things start going bad? Where you were unhappy, or yeah, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if you could kind of share what began happening that deviated from what had been.
So I came to the UK on a working holiday visa. I don't know if you can still get 2-year working holiday visas. But over the course of that 2 years, things started to like deteriorate, I suppose, or just get harder. The boy's dad didn't seem to not trust me. He'd question where I'd been, and my intentions for certain things. He'd spend a lot of time sort of out with friends drinking and not want to come home or tell me where he was, things like that. Then when we moved, so after that first 2 years, and I needed to either go back to Australia or be sponsored to stay in the UK. He said that he wasn't going to sponsor me, that he didn't want to go through that process again, and that I needed to ask my workplace if they would sponsor me. So I did, and they said that they couldn't because of the nature of the job that I was doing, which I relayed back to him, and he was like, oh, okay, then I guess I will have to sponsor you. So he signed the forms, but I paid for the whole process. When we moved, then he decided that he wanted to do a master's degree, and we moved from the south coast of England to sort of a different town where he could do that master's. And he told me at that time that I needed to pay for the whole of our rent, because if he wasn't my partner, or if we weren't a couple, then he would have had that paid for him as a student. And that was sort of the beginning of sort of that just really difficult sort of feeling like I had to prove my worth and like go the extra mile, pay my way, show that
Yeah.
all of those things. I don't even know where to find
No,
words.
you, no, you articulated that perfectly, and people will resonate with that. And I too was at that point multiple times, and you're left thinking, why am I now feeling like this? Why is he making me feel this way? And then I think it's a loving, trusting person. You internalize it and think, okay, they must be right. You know? Like, okay, I can and I will step up and I'll make it happen. Because if he wants to do this, then okay, it's all about him. So, okay, I'm gonna do it. So, keep on telling us what followed.
So we lived in, so he did his master's degree. I worked full time. Paid the rent and split the bills with him.
And you had your boys.
No, this is before my
Okay.
boys were born. That wasn't until about 3 years later. So we I didn't like the town that we were living in, and I said to him shortly after we moved there, when you finish your master's degree, let's move out of this town. It's not a nice place to live. And so we eventually moved. About a year after moving is when I fell pregnant with our first son. He was planned, but we almost broke up just before I found out that I was pregnant with him. And we decided to stay together because we were both the unborn child's parents. And then pregnancy does strange things to your hormones, doesn't it?
Oh, yes. Yes.
And that was I had a really lovely pregnancy with my first son, and it felt like everything could be fixed and life would settle down and be okay. And by that time he was my ex was working in a full-time job related to the master's degree that he'd got. Life seemed to be pretty reasonable, pretty sort of the average sort of young family.
Okay, then take us up to a point where things became unmanageable and you were in a bad state of mind. Now, I am okay, you never told me you were in a bad state of mind, but I know from my own experience that there comes a point with all narcissists where you're broken. You are just like, don't know what ends up, what ends down, what the fuck is happening. You just are in a bad way. So if you're okay talking about what led up to that, it would be appreciated and people will relate. So.
I think when my second son was born and we moved to Devon, where I am now, and my ex was working as a freelance illustrator and I was looking after the boys. I was on maternity leave for the first 2 months when my second son was up until he was 9 months old. But he didn't sleep. He didn't sleep through the night until he was about 5. And so I was sleep deprived and trying to sort of be a mum.
Yeah.
And at that time as well, instead of going back to like a 9-to-5 job, I decided that if my ex could freelance, then I probably could too. And that's when I began my freelance writing, my copywriting work. So trying to juggle motherhood and keeping a house and starting a business was really tough, and particularly without the support of my then partner, yeah, I did start to feel a bit crazy and not know sort of, like you say, what way was up. I got in touch with the health system here. I did a course of cognitive behavioral therapy, discovered meditation, and started to sort of eke out a little bit of peace for my own head. Around that time, sort of my ex said that he wasn't able to pay half of the family finances, and I said that I would take care of bills, and what he earned should go into family savings. Then COVID happened, the boys were home from school, we were home ed, doing trying to, like so many people around the world, home ed, trying to keep your business running, and the house that we were renting got sold, so we had to move. So we moved to the house that I was in when I finally left, and that was done with my savings and my looking for a house, and it was there that things got really sort of difficult, where my boys started blaming me for things that were clearly not my fault, like their difficulty making friendships at school. My ex would say how pleased he was when projects I was trying to start wouldn't get off the ground. Those sorts of situations kept happening with more frequency.
Okay, so I want to interject by saying the narcissist loves nothing more than when they turned everyone important to you, your boys, against you, and have made things so difficult for you that their hope is that you become totally reliant on them. They do everything. I mean, what you just shared is classic narcissistic abuse. So keep on sharing.
I didn't even know what narcissistic abuse was then, or I just
No.
knew that it was an unhealthy relationship.
Yep.
And I knew that everything I'd tried up to that point wasn't making any difference. And so I said to him that it wasn't working. I didn't want to be with him anymore. This is after I broke my wrist. So I broke my wrist. I was stood in the kitchen, and he was having a go at me. What's wrong? I can tell there's something up with you. What's wrong? And I just turned around and I said, I can't do this anymore. And he said, no, I've not wanted to do it for months. And I said, okay, well then let's figure out how to split up and separate, and we'll tell the boys. And so it took months from that point for us to actually separate. And it was through that process of trying to separate finances and things like that that my bank said to me that they thought the relationship I was in was abusive.
Yeah. During that time, did he come back and say, oh no, we can work it out, or you won't be able to do it without me? I mean, they use manipulative tactics, or did he make you fearful about leaving him? Did yeah.
At that time, he kept saying that he was going to move out and he was going to move to an artists community and he was going to move here and then he was going to live on a boat and all these different things. And I was going to be able to stay in that house with my boys, but it never eventuated, and no actual action towards those ends was made. And occasionally he'd say, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to do this to our boys? Are you sure? And eventually it got to a point I could see that he wasn't making any sort of attempts to move out like he said he was going to do. And so I did move out. And it was then, as I was trying to close down our joint account that he was refusing to come into the bank to do, that the bank said to me that they thought that that was an abusive relationship. They looked at the account details and saw sort of who was putting money into that joint account and what was coming out.
Wow.
And that sort of got me looking into sort of the different ways that couples abuse each other, which is not really a fun journey, is it?
No. And what's worse in my mind is having to step aside and allow your children to see them for who they are. As moms, we protect our kids. We make excuses for the narcissistic parent. And then the day comes where you have to rip off the band-aid and allow them to be fully exposed. And I hearing you, feeling you, it took me back to those times in my journey. But here's the uptick. What was the final situation or situation that had you standing up, put your shoulders back, chin up, and determined to get out of this and be done once and for all?
I think it was my younger son turning around to me and saying, you're the reason I don't have friends at school because you moved us to this tiny village where I don't get to see anyone in this crappy house that isn't big enough for us. You're the reason. And that was basically my ex's words coming through my younger son's mouth.
So, what did you do then?
I moved. Last summer, I spent most of last summer looking at flats big enough for me and my two boys, and then when I found one, I moved. And my ex wasn't happy because he said that he wasn't ready to move, and he stayed in the house that we'd shared, that I'd paid the last sort of 3 months or so rent on. Well, I just moved out. I left after sort of like there was still a month to go on the rent, and I just didn't want to be there anymore. So I moved and have room for my boys to stay here, and he and my ex ended up moving to a share house. So he rents a room in a house, and that's where my boys go to visit him. So
Okay. Your courage is like off the charts, and anyone who's ever been where you were and I have been know what it takes to move to. I mean, it's not just the physical action of packing up and moving. That's the easy part. But dealing with your partner emotionally abusing you, manipulating your boys, it takes a warrior spirit to be able to do what you did. And I applaud you. I hug you. And I want everyone hearing your story to know anything is possible if you have the courage and belief that it will work out.
there was a lot of sort of self-talk, like a battle in my head. Like there was the doubting me saying, you can't do this by yourself. How are you going to support yourself and two boys without their dad in the picture? And then I'd argue back with myself, well, of course I can, because I've been supporting myself and two boys and their dad for the last however many years. So I'm pretty sure I can do it without another adult there to carry. But then but the universe was with me as well, because things aligned. Like I picked up a really good contract that meant I had the bond and first month's rent when I needed it. I had consistent work that I needed to keep sort of the wheels turning, and all of those things sort of, like I say, it aligned for me. And again, as I said, like I did a lot of journaling at that time about what my ideal future looked like, and not so much what it looked like, but what it felt like. And that helped me keep going when it felt like maybe I couldn't.
Oh my God. Thank you for sharing that everything about your story resonates. I've walked in your shoes, and I have to tell you, the day came when my husband, soon to be ex-husband, said to me, you can't do anything without me. You're not gonna get better than me. You're gonna die alone. I said, thank you for allowing me to see that I can do it all without you. Secondly, if you are the best I can get, I'm cool with dying alone. Bye-bye. Get out. Just get the fuck out. So, oh my God. Thank you. So, why don't we end this? Well, not yet. So, let's now go to where you and I met. And I did your psychic medium reading and energy healing, and folks who are listening, I want y'all to know Victoria was not paid for a testimonial. Okay, so please share how those two sessions helped you realize things and to move on in your healing journey.
So after I moved out, I was still sort of spiraling in my head about.
And that was when?
That was sort of at the end of summer last year, so September, August, September time. So I was still sort of like, I was elated that I'd sort of left that situation physically, but I think in my heart and my head, I was still processing and trying to make sense of what the hell had gone on. And trying to understand sort of how I'd gotten into a relationship that my bank, of all people, of all organizations, was telling me was abusive, and weighing up, was it abusive? Was he the abusive one? Was I the abusive one? Was so a lot of questions that I was working through and trying to make sense of, and trying to sort of create a new life as well. When you got in touch with me, one of the big questions that I had in my head was, what if I am the abusive partner and it wasn't him? And everything that he told me, that I was controlling because I was the one paying the bills, that I was manipulating the situation because I was trying to close down the joint account, all of those things, what if they were true? And you did first of all, the psychic medium reading where you spoke to my spirit team, which was a revelation and such a relief to hear an outside perspective on the situation that had happened, and stopped that whirling sort of questioning, self-recrimination cycle that I was on. And then the energy healing that came sort of 2 or 3 days after, I think it was, left me feeling so light and so energized that I wasn't walking through treacle anymore, trying to make the steps towards creating a new life. It was like somebody had removed those barriers and I could move freely again. I felt like me again, and I hadn't felt like me for years.
This is that point where we're really connected with our inner child, but also free of all of that heavy, ugly energy. I mean, I know for me, when that happened, and yeah, there is nothing like it. For me, I went from, like you said, feeling weighed down and all of that to like line, like wow, okay. I mean, the sky is the limit.
Yeah, it's like you've been walking around with stones in all of your pockets without realizing, and someone then takes them out and you're like, oh my God, I can run actually quite fast when I'm not
Yeah.
when I'm not carrying all this extra weight.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Thank you for sharing that too. Now, in closing, dear woman, what would you like to tell other men or women if they are in a similar mindset or situation that you were in?
I think that you can trust yourself. I think that's the biggest thing that gets taken away from you when you get embroiled in these sorts of relationships, is that you start doubting that you can trust yourself and that you have your own best interests at heart in a way that isn't hurting other people. But you can trust yourself, and looking after yourself doesn't mean that you're hurting somebody else. In fact, that's a good thing. Looking after yourself means that you can look after the people that you love better.
Love that. And one other thing, you have intuitive abilities. When did those first present, and how did they help you through all of this?
They have intuitive abilities in the way that you do, Shari, but I get feelings about certain things that like if something's right or if something's not adding up. I think a lot of people sort of have that feeling, don't they?
Yeah.
For me, I think it helped me through the whole situation by giving me those steps. So by taking up healthier habits like morning meditation, by taking up journaling, by giving myself those self-care moments, I think it guided me to persist with those. And doing that helped me build the strength that I needed to make the break from that relationship.
Love it. And we all have intuitive abilities. It's just a matter of figuring out what they are and having the confidence to listen or hear or see and act upon it. And you articulated that perfectly. Girl, this has been amazing, and I love you more now than I did an hour ago. We really are kindred spirit. Thank you, and keep on going and shining bright.
Well, thank you, Shari. I'm so pleased that we met. And who'd have thought on LinkedIn that you'd find?
Yeah. I know. Who would have thought?
Thanks for listening to this episode of Transcending Trauma, the Spiritual Odyssey. If you're working to overcome trauma and would like to work with me or be a guest on my show, contact me through my website at shariroberts.org. Please hit the follow button to make sure you don't miss any episodes. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn at Shari Roberts. You can find all the links in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you. I'm Shari Roberts, your host, reminding you that you're never alone. Until next time, sending you love and light.